Throughout the centuries, there has been no shortage of conversation about the Jewish people's relationship to God. And there's plenty to talk about. For starters, the names of God seem endless. God, Adonai, Hashem, El, Elohim, Shaddai, Makom, and more. The God that is depicted throughout our Torah may feel too esoteric or hierarchical for many of us. And then the role of God has been questioned, especially in times of tragedy for our people. There is also a long-standing cadre of Jewish agnostics and atheists, people who took their Jewishness seriously, even if God wasn't part of that equation. And of course, there are those of us who are just too unsure. If we were to each share our own definition of God, I'm positive that no two answers would be exactly the same. Tied up in these questions about God are also questions about us. What's our agency? What's our role in the world? Where is God in our lives? In what feels like an enormous tangle of questions and potential answers, our Torah portion this week, Vayishlach, features a literal wrestling match between one of our patriarchs, Jacob, and God. Or is it with someone or with something else? To pick up on our epic Genesis story, Jacob is preparing to meet Esau again, the brother he cheated out of their father's birthright. He's nervous because he believes Esau will attack him in revenge, so he sends a peace offering ahead of him on the path and takes his family across the river for protection. Then our Torah reads, Vayivater Yaakov levado. Now Jacob was left alone. Vaye'avek ish imo ad alot hashachar. And a figure wrestled with him until the rise of dawn. Who is this figure that Jacob wrestles with, and why? Is it another person, God, someone else entirely? Understanding this figure and this holy wrestling match can help us understand our role and perhaps God's role in the world. Now, let's start with the theory that this figure was another person. The Hebrew word used here is ish, typically translated as man, including in modern Hebrew. Another piece of evidence that this figure could be a physical person is that in this wrestling match, when the figure begins to lose, the figure hits Jacob's hip socket. Later on, after Jacob has won the match, he was solea al yeracho. He was limping on account of his hip. One would think that if Jacob is actually injured in this match, that there had to be someone else there to inflict this wound. To continue this thread, many of our commentators note that the word avek, wrestle, in our portion is also the word used for dust or dusty, implying that Jacob and the figure wrestled so vigorously that they were kicking up dust throughout the match and that the two of them were covered in dust by the end. So maybe this figure was another person. But what about the theory that this figure was God or some kind of messenger from God? Remember, Jacob is all alone at night when this battle begins. Then the figure, once defeated, tells Jacob that his name shall be Israel, literally meaning one who struggles with God because he has prevailed in this battle. And Jacob names the place of the match Peniel, saying, Ki ra'iti Elohim panim el panim, for I have seen God face to face. So in Jacob's eyes, this was not a random encounter with another person. This was a direct wrestling match with God. This also follows the pattern of Jacob's ancestors, receiving a name change from God, not from some other person, after passing through a particular challenge. So maybe this figure truly was God or a messenger from God. In deciphering this passage, it's also important to understand Jacob in that moment. As one of our commentators, Rashi, notes, Jacob is not only scared that Esau is going to kill him for taking his birthright, but Jacob is scared that he might have to do the killing in this battle. He doesn't want to be in this position at all. And then if we are to look later on in our portion, after Jacob receives this new special name of Israel, he's actually still referred to as Jacob. This may be evidence that even with this game-changing holy moment, Jacob's transformation isn't complete. Perhaps Jacob is wrestling not for a single match in a single night, but for a lifetime. And there's plenty for Jacob to be wrestling about. Wrestling over his past, stealing the birthright from Esau, running away from home, working 14 years to marry his wives, starting a new family, a whole host of things in his past. And Jacob is wrestling over his present, the pressure of this moment, preparing to meet Esau again, feeling responsible for all of his family and their protection. And also wrestling over his future, helping his family thrive, exploring this new relationship with God, and ultimately ensuring the future of the Israelites and the Jewish people. Jacob is stuck between who he's been and who he wants to be. And for a personal transformation this large, it takes time. But who is Jacob wrestling with? Who is this figure, this being? What if, just maybe, Jacob is wrestling with himself? The flawed human parts of himself, the holy, godlike parts of himself. It's all one big internal wrestling match that begins, not ends, Jacob's commitment to personal transformation and growth. Because in this moment, Jacob knows he must find a way to reconcile with Esau, the brother he hurt. He knows he must reconnect with his family, and he knows from this holy encounter that his life has some type of larger purpose. Perhaps Jacob wrestles with himself to find a way toward his destiny in the world. And so too for each of us. Whether they feel big or small at the time, we have very real challenges to confront in our lives. Navigating hard relationships, the grips of perfectionism, feeling confused about our purpose in life, how to leave a legacy that's meaningful, and so many more. We are approaching a new year. Very soon, it's going to be 2023, whether we're ready or not. And many of us will choose new goals or commitments to tackle these big challenges in our lives. So let us remember this lesson from Jacob. When we choose to confront the challenges in our lives, when we try to change ourselves for the better, we are wrestling with the holiest parts of ourselves. We are wrestling with the parts of us that affirm that we are created in the image of God, that we hold holiness within ourselves just for being human. And yet sometimes it does take that wrestling to be reminded of that reality. As we navigate these challenges within ourselves and throughout our world, may our wrestling, may our striving be like Jacob. Experiences filled with holiness, with goodness, with purpose, and with peace. Shabbat shalom.